After the news at 11, police spent £130,000 and over 2,000 man-hours on the hunt for the Croydon cat killer. It took 3 years to work out that some of the 400 cats that were mutilated had been hit by cars and probably eaten by a fox. Was that a waste of police time and money? Let's come to this story, though, that's in the Telegraph today, that I think some listeners will remember at the time it happening, because it took place in Croydon, and we covered it at the time on LBC, but it sort of went quiet for a bit. Do you remember the case of the Croydon cat killer? This story that blew up for several weeks and months 3 years ago, because people kept finding mutilated cats knocking around Croydon. And in the end, over the course of this investigation, there are about 400 of them, 400 dead or mutilated cats in the Croydon area. So police, under, I imagine, quite a lot of public pressure, got involved to try and find out what was going on that was leading to so many cats being killed. And after 3 years of investigating, they basically had to conclude that they couldn't pin it on any human evidence. They suggested that actually the most likely cause of death for the vast majority of these cats was that they were hit by a car and or a fox got them. And we've just had figures released today after Freedom of Information requests that shows that the police spent £130,000 and 2,250 man-hours on the hunt for the non-existent Croydon cat killer before finding out the pets had probably been hit by cars and then mutilated by foxes. At one stage, this Freedom of Information request suggests that there were 15 officers working full-time on this investigation, that the Met Police spent £6,000 on cat post-mortems in 1 year alone during the 3-year hunt for the killer, and that actually the Met could not give a total figure for money spent because, quotes, records that would allow the exact time the officers and members had spent on the investigation are not held, so it may well be the case that there was even more spent. Now, in a period where police budgets are very stretched, where police time is very, very stretched, is it only with the benefit of hindsight that we can say that this was a waste of time and money? Or should it be the case that the police were right to investigate it in the way in which they did, to find out if there was anything more malign going on? Or based on, I don't know, perhaps your experience of it, if you were in Croydon and maybe you had, I don't know, a cat that was involved, you thought it was a ridiculous thing for the police to get so heavily involved in, and that potentially they were only doing so because of the pressure put on them by the press coverage, that they had to react to it, that they did what they thought was the best thing to do, but that £130,000 and, more to the point, thousands of hours spent investigating for dead cats is a waste of time. 0345 6060 973. Let's speak to Peter Kirkham, former Detective Chief Inspector with the Met Police, and also Mick Neville, who is a former Detective Inspector with the Met Police. Evening to you both.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm a Detective Chief Inspector like Peter Kirkham as well.
Yes, I know. Remarkable to have your colleagues alongside you. Peter, let me start with you first tonight. What do you make of these figures and the criticism that the Met is getting?
The Met gets criticised, whatever it's done. If you can imagine, after all the outcry, and the press have got to take responsibility for their role in this, each member of the public who loses a cat is obviously upset about that, but the thing only gets sort of any significant momentum when the press roll with it, and they did big time. Can you imagine what would have been happening if, as would still be the case, cats keep dying and the police are saying we're not going to do anything about it? You'd be going absolutely berserk about the police not looking into these things.
Sure, but
they've had to do what they've had to do, and looking at it, bearing in mind there's 400 cats and all the rest of it, that's about 5 hours each and 325 quid if it works out on average. I don't think that's massively excessive. It's not an easy thing to do. They've done what they've had to do.
Mick, there was no other way the police could get around this. The press pressure was too much. Is that your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think I disagree with Pete on this sort of aspect of it's just cats. The way, I mean, I've looked into this, and I've looked into this inquiry, and I work with it for free with the charity who are looking into it. The first thing I would say is the impact on people. So I say it's just a cat, but that cat is the only thing an old lady has in her life. The impact of finding it beheaded outside her door is, or it's a little girl who owns that cat. It's a terrible, it's a terrible thing, and something had to be done about this, and it goes much wider than Croydon. And the other thing as well about this nonsense about foxes doing it, well, they're very funny foxes, because I know through looking into this that these bodies are often laid out in a ritualistic way, like in a triangle, or body parts are found 7 miles away, or several months they reappear. So this idea that a fox is like hiding things in a fridge or carrying things for 7 miles, it is ridiculous. And no doubt some of the things have been killed by foxes, but I have no doubts that some of them have been killed by humans, and it's a very sick individual who would kill a cat, chop it up, and then put it in a triangle so the owners could see it. And surely we need to find that person before he moves on to do even more wicked things.
So you're saying, Mick, that based on your looking into this case as a former detective chief inspector, not only do you think that maybe the press pressured the police into doing it, but the police haven't actually discovered what's really been going on?
Yeah, I don't know if the press actually, there was a charity that put a lot of pressure on, and good luck to them, really, because they're animal welfare people. I think really with these things is that something has to be done here. You can't have somebody, potentially, chopping up cats, laying them out in triangles or whatever bizarre position, leaving them so, vulnerable people can see them. It's just that's the psychological damage to people if they found that. So the police have to do something. But as Pete says, when you look at the actual costs or the time, it's minimum. When you think the police investigate, hate crimes, which are somebody had a poppy on a car, or a dog made a mess outside my door and I think it's racist. When police have to investigate that, this pales into insignificance, really.
Well, clearly there's a sliding scale of what needs to be investigated. Yeah. But I think, Peter, a lot of my listeners, and indeed some of them getting in touch now, saying, well, actually, if only 9% of crimes are getting solved, if you can't do the basics, don't try and solve cat crimes, says one texter. That's the attitude that the police are being met with at the moment.
That would be the case, but as Mick says, and I wasn't trying to belittle the importance or the impact of the death of cats on cat owners. My mum's a big cat lady, might say with the mad bit attached as well. But
I
can just imagine how the impact would be if that was to happen to a cat.
But I get that.
And so it's important that.
But the police don't decide surely what to. The police don't decide what to investigate based on the apparent emotional impact that it has on someone.
Well, to a certain extent, they do.
Really? So if I got really upset about a dog defecating on my doorstep, the police would have a look at it.
Well, if there's some indication or some allegation that it's hate related. Then yes, they would, because we know that dog excrement on doorsteps, pushed through door letterboxes and whatever has been part of hate crimes in the past. So, I challenge Mick about belittling the hate crime incidents. They need looking at as well, but it's all in proportion.
But Mick, that is the stage.
In relation to the cats, if it was just one, I'd agree. You wouldn't launch a massive dragnet for one cat death, but there is also the thing, and Mick hasn't, I think he was sort of implying it, we do know from research over the years and in multiple countries that sometimes some of the worst types of murderers start with torturing and killing animals, and so there's potential there to nip something in the bud that's far more serious. So when there was this apparent linked series of potential crimes, the police, I believe, were quite right to have a look at it. I think they've done it in reasonable proportion. We can argue about the numbers a little bit up and down,
the hours and
stuff.
But
it's not massively excessive in the big scheme of things, bearing in mind the number of incidents.
When you say you've looked at this, Mick, is that your conclusion, that there's more to this than meets the eye, and actually this could lead to something much bigger? And what evidence do you have for that?
Well, absolutely. Well, the evidence I have is, firstly, that there's many of these cases where they've been laid out in a ritualistic way, the bodies.
Terrible.
Foxes don't do that. It's also the distance. Rabbit's head is cut off in one place and it's found 7 miles away. Or, things turning up months after the event. These are very sinister and weird events. Foxes don't write the name and the address down of the owner and then bring the thing back. So these are very sinister things. There's a charity that's looking into it. They've logged all the cases. They're all over the country. And it's in certain parts of the country. So the foxes only do certain things in Portsmouth, but not in Brighton. It would seem not to me. It just seems very sinister. And as Peter's rightfully said, one of the things, like if you look at people like Ian Brady, Ted Bundy, these people start off by doing appalling things to animals and then they move on to people. And so if somebody is doing sick things, or there's a group of people doing these sick things, the police need to look into it because it's a serious matter.
So if they've got 15 guys on this, at one stage it seemed like they did.
Can I clarify that? Because I know well what that is. There's 15 officers at one time on the Croydon crime squad who were investigating robbery, burglary, knife crime, and one of the DSs was involved in this case. So the idea that there was 15 officers on this case full-time is nonsense.
But there were at least 4 on it full-time, according to the Freedom of Information.
There's one DS who had the task, amongst several other things, of looking into this. So the idea there was teams of officers on this is sheer nonsense.
According to BuzzFeed News, a dedicated team of 4 officers worked full-time on the case, trying to find out who had killed and mutilated up to 400 cats.
That is not what I know.
Well, if we can argue over the numbers...
The number of hours, Tom, 2,250 hours, that's about 280 officer days. So it sounds to me like there was maybe a few officers working on it at different times. But
if Mick's right
on it, it would be for a very short period.
If Mick's right and they haven't come to the right conclusion on this, then are you saying, Mick, that they should have spent more time and effort?
I don't know. What it should have been, I think, is more organised. There should have been more cooperation, because it wasn't just Croydon. You had offences all the way to the north in Liverpool, all the way to the south in Portsmouth. So you have several different police forces doing different things.
They spent 3 years
and not
on
coordinating
this.
it.
They spent 3 years doing it.
For whatever reason, it's not good enough. For whatever reason, the UK is not very good at inter-police cooperation. There's a lot of inter-force rivalries, things get missed along the way. The worst case is the Ian Huntley case, where information weren't exchanged. This is always going to happen. So somehow, this was never coordinated. So the whole picture of the suspects would have been missed. It's hard enough in London, where you've got 2 police forces, the City and then the Met, and then you've got BTP as well somewhere in the mix. So these things are always going to be difficult. And what I will maintain is that there is something sinister here that needs to be looked into, rather than just saying it's foxes, because it doesn't seem to be that to me.
Well, let's see. I mean, you never know who's listening. Mick, thank you. Mick Neville, former Detective Chief Inspector with the Met, and to you, Peter, as always, Peter Kirkham, former Detective Chief Inspector with the Metropolitan Police. You can't move for them at the moment on this radio station. So, aside from what you think's gone on here, is it the case that, as Peter suggested, that if somebody is so emotionally affected by what they think is a crime that has taken place, that the police will look at it based on the effect that it's had on them, plus whatever else is going on to mean that they think that a crime has been committed, and that this is a perfectly legitimate thing to spend 3 years, £130,000 and nearly 2,500 hours of man hours in investigating, on the basis that, as Mick has suggested, there might be something really sinister going on here, but the police haven't found it yet. 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. You can tweet at LBC. Fundamentally, there is a suggestion now that any incident that is given to the police, that someone says a crime is being committed, we expect, as taxpayers, the police to pick that up. And actually, given the funding problems, given the management of police time, which is clearly an issue, I wonder whether we're getting to the point where the police have to say, we just can't investigate all reports of crimes now, and we're going to have to prioritise them. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to Late Nights. Tom Swarbrick here on LBC. It's 11:17. Our cat, says Snowy, is like a family member. The wife probably likes it more than me. The police should be looking into any strange animal death, be it a cat, dog, or anything else that looks dodgy. Fish, gerbil, hamster. Graham has texted, of course it was a waste of time. Animals are scavenged in the countryside. In the cities, the mutilated bodies are found in the street, where in the country they are dragged out of sight. Anyway, the 100 million birds tortured and killed by cats a year would be dead chuffed, says Graham. Come on. Let's speak to Hayley, who, I gather, Hayley, your cat was actually sort of caught up in this, found dead in a car park not far from where you are in Surrey. Good evening to you.
Hi, yeah, that's right.
I'm sorry that your cat met with that end. How did it happen, and what were you told about what happened?
Basically, she didn't come in for dinner one night, and we went looking for her the next morning, couldn't find her. We put up posters, we called the vets, no news. 10 days later, we got a call from Tony at Snarl to tell us that actually the police had called him because they'd found our cat with the injuries that are significant.
And Snarl is the charity that's responsible for dealing with this, or that have taken a real interest in trying to deal with this. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So you get a call to say your cat has been mutilated?
Yeah.
What's your cat called?
Squiggles.
Okay. And how long had you had Squiggles?
She was 18 months old.
Oh, young.
Yeah.
And what kind of injuries, if you don't mind me asking, did Squiggles have?
She didn't have her tail or her ears. She was missing a back leg, and she'd been sliced underneath.
Oh my God!
Not ripped by foxes or punctured by foxes. It was a clean, cut.
And did the Met get in touch with you as a result of their investigation into this?
No. Not
at all?
Nope.
Do you think it should have formed part of their investigation, even though it happened outside?
It was passed on to them. The only contact I had was with Surrey Police, which was one phone call and then a letter to tell me that they'd closed the case.
Why did they say they closed it?
They didn't. I got a letter in the post to say that the case is closed.
And they didn't say it's most likely to be foxes, or we haven't got the time to look at this?
No, they didn't say anything.
And do you think the police should have looked into it? Do you think that is their responsibility, given the injuries that Squiggles suffered?
Well, when it's the police saying that it's going to move on to people next, why would they not? If they can stop it while it's only cats, well, not only cats, but if they can stop it at animals, why wouldn't they?
And that's what you think would happen here, given the sort of the brutal way in which Squiggles...
Well, that's what the reports have said.
Well, it's sort of confusing, isn't it? Because that was what people were saying might be possible. But the police officers that looked into this for the best part of 3 years and spent money and time doing it said that the chances are it's cars and foxes.
That's not what they said in the first place, though.
No, that's not... They thought that they were looking for something more sinister than that, but in the end, they said cars and foxes.
But cars and foxes don't make clean cuts.
No, well, that's the weird thing.
And foxes wouldn't take ears and tails when they could take the main body parts that are far more nutritious and meaty for them.
So do you still feel that you can make a case for the police to look into this, or do you think that's it now? We're never going to know?
No, I think that it should be looked into.
Even though it might cost lots of money and take lots of time.
Well, if it's going to stop people being hurt, then why not?
If it's a choice between a burglary or Squiggles, do you think that the police...
To me, it's always going to be Squiggles, but...
Yeah. I completely get that. And, Hayley, I do understand. I have a cat myself, so I understand the attachment to the cat, and finding it in that circumstances would be horrendous. But if it's a toss-up between investigating a burglary and investigating your dead cat, I think a lot of people would, even though they completely accept that you're very upset by it, would think that the burglary needs to come first. Thank you for your call. 0345 6060 973 to Reigate, to Sally. Hi, Sally.
Hello.
Hello. What do you want to tell me?
Well, it's just I was just listening with interest. It's my family cat. Was murdered by the Croydon cat killer. And like the last caller said, it's ludicrous to think that it would be foxes or a car. Right. Basically, my cat was taken on Easter Sunday, and apparently the police said that a lot of the animals are taken over public holidays, presumably just to add to the horribleness of it, because obviously when your animal goes missing, it's really distressing anyway. Yeah. And then Toots turned up... cut in half with a clean blade. A week and a half later, we didn't find him. It was actually a local gardener found him very near to where we live. And he was too distressed to actually speak to us. So I really don't know in what state he was found, but I know from all the reports and from other people in Snarl who were the charity looking into it, that basically they're left in a lot of kind of sexual positions, or he was literally, we just found his body cut in half. My mum and sister took him to the vet because they didn't know what else to do, and the vets took one look at him and basically were like, you need to go and find the other body parts, it's not right. And then they told us that it was basically the Croydon cat killer. The vets know instantly. I
It's not a
understand.
fox. It's not a fox.
It's not a fox. They had three individual people look at Toots and they could not find any animal saliva on him whatsoever.
Sorry, did you say Toots?
Toots was my cat, yeah. And they didn't find any animal saliva. Now, if a fox had got at him, they would find animal saliva. There is no way that animals... and also, if you've ever heard a cat and a fox, they don't fight... Yeah, and they're not even natural predators, each of them. My cat has lived with foxes for years. We live sort of in the country. If you hear a fox crying, you'll know that it sounds like a woman being attacked.
Yeah, it sounds awful, horrible.
And if you hear a cat being attacked, you know, there is no way that all of these things could happen. And my mum said the night it happened on Easter Sunday, it was dead quiet. And what you just saying about a burglary, we've also been burgled. And Toots being murdered, which is essentially what he is far worse than any he has been taken from us. Yeah, it's far worse.
So, and again, hang on, go on, say because.
Because it's horrific someone coming into your house and taking things from you. Yes, it's horrific. I know what that feels like too. But someone coming literally and stalking round your house, taking your animal, killing it, cutting it up and bringing it back a week and a half later is also incredibly threatening. And all of the psychologists have said is basically this person who's doing it is a power thing and it's a threatening thing. He's also beheaded foxes and things like that. He's also beheaded swans. He's left them out for children to find.
Oh my God.
It's a whole big thing. And I completely understand. Obviously, if you've had a child who's been stabbed, you want all of the resources. And I completely understand that. But as I was saying to the person that I spoke to earlier, when my mum is 77 and has worked her whole life, I have worked my whole life, my sister has worked her whole life, 325 quid or whatever that guy worked out of how much the police spent, well, that's well worth the money. I mean,
well, it is if they come to a conclusion. I mean, from what you're saying, you sound like you have looked into this in great detail because of what happened to Toots, and you concluded that this cannot just be the work of foxes and cars.
I don't know how. Well,
and therefore, the police should be doing more to try and find out what on earth's going on.
Well, yes, because it's well known that people who go on to murder women or people start with animals, and he obviously wants to upset people.
But if the police say, Sally, and I know that this can come across as heartless and lacking in emotional intelligence, but if the police say, look, we've looked at this for 3 years, we've had enough people on it that it's cost 130 grand, and we've really tried here, and we can't find anything that connects all this stuff, so we've got to conclude that it was cars and foxes. I'm really sorry, we're never going to find out what happened to Toots.
It makes me angry. I mean, it's fine. If they want to say we don't want to spend the money, then fine, but be honest about it. But I don't believe that they believe that either.
You think they think something else was going on?
Yeah, absolutely, because we weren't spoken to. We were never spoken to by the Met, but we were spoken to by Surrey Police. And it was actually, my mum didn't call the police. It was the vets that called the police.
Really?
My mum didn't. It's you know, obviously, we're all grown up enough to know that things are covered up and all the rest of it. As I said, I appreciate. But a burglary, it feels like you've been burgled 100 times over because someone has come within metres of my mum's property twice, to take something very precious. They know that your animals are very precious.
Well, Sally,
so I understand people not understanding that.
And I think there are a lot of people who just won't understand how you can put a burglary and the death of a cat next to one another and say that the cat should take greater police priority. But I appreciate that the circumstances in which you found Toots must have been utterly, utterly horrific. And there are a lot of people, I can't believe how many people getting in touch with the programme tonight about this, but there are so many people suggesting that something really rather rum was going on, and actually the police should have spent much more time doing it. Although Simon tweets, Sally, thank you, Simon tweets to say, these cat deaths, I've always believed it to be extraterrestrial or paranormal. I mean, we are slightly through the looking glass on that one, if that is going to be your conclusion from it. Tweet here from Graham. Of course it was a waste of time. Animals are killed all over the place. It shouldn't be a problem for the police to look at it, but they shouldn't be taking 3 years to do so. Well, try telling that to those people that we've just heard from. Try telling it to those people who have lost their pets, part of the family, in a horrendous way that the police shouldn't be bothering with it. But put against the idea of a burglary or something more serious, we are suggesting that because it happened to us and we feel awful about it and it's impacted on our lives in a bad way, we expect as taxpayers the police to cover it, to go after it, to pursue it with the same vim and vigour that they would pursue a burglary that happened to somebody else. We expect the police to investigate every report of crime, even at a time when resources and hours are stretched. 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. You can tweet at LBC. More of your calls after the news headlines. You're listening to Late Nights. Tom Swarbrick here on LBC. 11:30 is the time. Let's come back to your calls then on this issue of police time and what it's used for. Jane is in Potter's Bar. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Tom.
Hello. What do you want to tell me?
Right, well, basically, my cat was Taz, the big Bengal, the 5-year-old Bengal, and he was the predator. And when they come out of the rubbish about it was a fox, it is absolutely rubbish. Anybody who does any homework on foxes, they live with cats every day of the week. They don't eat cats. They do sort of like go around dead animals and take bits and pieces, but no way in a month of Sundays when my neighbour, my son and us, we saw Taz and the state of him, it was definitely done by a human because there was no blood. The cuts are all clean on these animals, what they do, like what one of the police officers said earlier. Some of them are laid out in a ritual way. And this is what the problem is that the police, well, they're giving you this quote of how much has been spent on it. But sadly, I can vouch for speaking to numerous victims because I reached out to a lot of people because I know what they were going through. Not one of us was ever asked any questions. Was your cat acting peculiar before he went missing? We never asked anything. And how can they solve anything without asking the victims any questions?
But would you, Jane? Look, I've got a cat, and I genuinely wouldn't know what cats acting peculiarly would look like.
Well, let me put it this way, right? Taz, like I say, he was a massive. He was as big as a fireplace.
Big as a fireplace?
Yeah, he was huge because he was Bengal. He was Bengal. Right. He was a big boy.
Sounds like a small dog.
Absolutely. Well, I'll say a medium-sized dog. Blimey. He would have. I mean, he would just kill pigeons and eat them. He would have took the fox out, and like what that lady said, the noise of a fox and the noise of a Bengal, and he sounded like a lion. There would have been carnage. There would have been people coming to the windows to see the noise. There would have been blood. There wasn't an ounce of blood on that cat. There was nothing. And
you're, as you've heard, Jane, you're not the first person to ring in tonight to say there's something really wrong here.
That's right.
Whilst I suppose perhaps praising the police for taking this seriously and looking into it for so long, how do you think they've come to the conclusion that they've come to that this was cars and foxes?
Basically, if you go back in time, back into 1998. There was a episode of cat killings then, and it was called Cat Flap. And if you read up on it, it's like reading the news today. And the same officer that shut this down and come out of the same story, it was a fox. And I think it's just their get out of jail card because they don't know what to do. Listen, if I knew that question, why did he come out of a load of rubbish like that, I'd tell you the answer. But it's just a lame excuse that they're using. And like I say, if you look that up, called Cat Flap, back in 98, it'd be like reading the news today.
Right.
And the sad thing is that the cat killings are still going on. And it's not about, it's just a cat like some... Listen, back in the days, you got a cat to kill the mice, you had a dog for protection, and it was there to do a job. But as we've all got a little bit more educated, they've become more like your family, your children. And it's how they're being done. And it's like, at the end of the day, because foxes live all over the world, why isn't it happening in America? Why isn't it happening in Australia? Why isn't it happening anywhere? Why is it in a small area from Croydon around the M25?
It is weird. I mean, I'm not going to deny it is a very odd set of events. And if you're saying that, and I completely believe you, that the kind of injuries that your cat suffered are not... they're so clean as to be not possible for a car or a fox to have done it, and there was no blood. So it does feel very, very odd. Jane, I'm sorry. I mean, imagine having a cat as big as a fireplace. John's in Morden. Hi, John.
Hello, good evening. Good evening. Yeah, so I really feel for Jane. I completely see what she's saying. But from my point of view, I think where she is the victim, I think it's her emotions and her sadness and her grief that is the issue here. And with all of these victims, it's to do with the families around it. And I think the support that they need perhaps shouldn't be coming from the police, who are stretched and over-resourced.
So the police should do the hard-headed thing of saying, look, I know you're really upset about your cat. I'm very sorry about it. We'll have a look into it. It's probably foxes.
Here's a phone number.
Yeah, well, that's what's happened to people.
Yeah, and I think that's all they can possibly do. I was the reason that I rang was it was on Thursday last week. I was cycling past a 6-car pile-up, 5 cars and a bus, and as the bus drove into the rear car, that car then went into the next. All the airbags went off, and I was the only witness there on the scene. It was on a busy road. I had to keep the traffic going. I pulled one of the drivers out, and when I phoned the police, they had no units. And for 45 minutes, I kept that road going, and I kept as many people safe as I possibly could on my own. I had my cycling high vis on and flashy lights, so I sort of felt safe enough. But
and were these people really injured?
There was only one, and he was walking, and that was the point. They said because he was able to walk, even though his back was completely out of place and he was bent double, because he could walk, it was apparently it was okay. So I was left doing this until rush hour died down, and in the end, I just had to think, I've got to leave this situation because I was already half an hour late for a meeting, and so in the end I had to leave it. But they never came. Police never came. They said it was a civil matter. No, and the bus driver, he was shaken. Everyone was shouting at him, and I had to try and calm them down. Say, look, it's only metal. No one's been killed. The bus driver is clearly as upset that he did this as you are, that you haven't been able to get to wherever you need to get to. But it was. I felt quite vulnerable and on my own. And in some ways, the police made the right call because I did cope and I did manage. And I'm sure the RAC turned up and one by one
towed them all away.
But
would you expect? You clearly would expect the police to come out to something like that.
Well, yes, or an ambulance. Just even in terms of reassurance, to know that things were at least. I was doing the right thing because in some ways I was in danger because I was trying to keep traffic moving because it was a busy road.
But that is where we're at, isn't it? It's the sort of expectation management now for the public of what the police are capable of doing and what they will do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had another quite sad incident 2 nights ago. We had just behind where I work. We had someone was stabbed in the chest, and it was a private thing, and both parties. There was no one else was at risk from it. But the police couldn't provide anything further than they didn't even clear up the blood. So the following morning, when I phoned the local Safer Neighbourhoods team, they said we can't, and because the council's privatised all the waste management, the waste management people won't come and clear out the blood either. So myself and one of my neighbours, we were out there with disinfectant and boiling water, clearing up. I mean, it wasn't gallons, but it was quite a lot of blood from a stabbing the night before, and that just to me feels
up the blood of someone who'd been stabbed in the street because no one would do it.
Because it was just off the street and it was on private land, and so it was in and that was only 3 nights ago.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it does seem it, and that was in liaison with the Safer Neighbourhoods team, who I know very well, and they're a great team, but they just are so under-resourced that was the reality of. I've had quite a dramatic 5 days, really.
Yeah, you need to lie down.
Yeah, maybe I do.
I can't, John. I am astonished that nobody came out to the crash. Although, again, as you say, maybe they were right not to. But having to clean up the blood of somebody who'd been stabbed in a street behind where you work is unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, surely we all pay taxes to. That's got to be somebody's job, hasn't it? I mean, or do we just take it upon ourselves now? I mean, I don't want to sound rude about it, but isn't somebody's there to do that, aren't they, as part of the crime scene or the investigation? John, thank you for the call. 0345 6060 973. Kevin on the Isle of Wight's Cross. Tom, you're obviously a cat hater. You're being totally insensitive. Cats are like members of the family to some people. Imagine an elderly person with their cat for company, and then one day some absolute mutilates it and kills it. You're so insensitive, I doubt you've even considered that, says Kevin. Well, I did start the programme by saying, I started the hour by saying that very thing. And as I've said during it, I've got a cat. It's a very nice cat. He's lovely. Well, he's not lovely. He's all right. But I've got a cat. And I totally get the affection that's caught up in it. And if it is the only thing you've got in the house and it's the only company you have, then of course you're going to treat it with a massive degree of reverence and emotion. I understand that. But put against what the police also have to do with burglaries and robberies and knife crime and all the rest of it, there has to be a question of how the police resource themselves. Winfrith on Twitter. People demanded it was investigated and got a media campaign going that pressurised the police into investigating. Now, the same media that amplified that pressure is blaming the police for wasting money. Sorry, outraged people wasted the money, not the police, says Winfrith. Well, there is some truth in the idea that it was partly down to press pressure that made the police go after this with such urgency, although according to you tonight, lots of you ringing in saying they've come to the completely wrong conclusion. 0345 6060 973. More of your calls after this. 11:45. I'm afraid I can't help but laugh at the way this text is phrased. David Attenborough had a programme with foxes and cats in. Both had respect for one another. Foxes do not kill cats. It's like the idea of them respecting, sort of silent nod as they pass one another in the street. Diane is in Swanage in Dorset. Hi, Diane.
Hi,
hello.
Tom. I joined this conversation quite late, okay, but I've listened to what I think his name was Nick Neville had to say.
Yes.
And I totally agree with everything that he said. I think to suggest that it's foxes is just nothing short of corruption, basically. Ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous.
Corruption.
But yes, I do, because they know it's not foxes. I've heard what some of the other people who have lost their animals, and you've heard descriptions of how these animals are found. And I believe Nick Neville mentioned something about, there's a more sinister underlying thing going on here. But like the thing that I feel more strongly about is that how the Met Office can justify spending over £11 million, okay, £11 million on looking for a child that went missing 11 years ago in Portugal because her parents went out drinking with their mates.
Well,
they can
Diane,
how can they justify spending £11 million on that? And people are whining about, I think it's the figure's £130?
Yeah, 130 grand.
The Met Office have just been granted another £150 to go, looking for this missing child. So,
but people do get wound up about the funding that has been, and you're talking about Madeleine McCann here, the funding that has been given to the investigation.
I'm surprised you're allowed to mention it. There's such a blackout on it. Well,
what do you mean?
It just seems to sort of like offend broadcasters, like when you mention anything. But anyway, I don't want to take away from the conversation at hand.
Well, I mean, we did it for an hour as a subject. The Met Police getting more funding from the Home Office to go and pursue what they say are active lines of inquiry into the McCann investigation. If the police tell the Home Office who they have to get the funding for this from, if the police say, we've got an active line of inquiry that we need to pursue and we need a bit more money to sort it out, it is a missing girl who went missing some time ago now.
11 years.
It would be astonishing.
No evidence of an abduction, but
do you not think it would be
on that one?
Well, do you not think it would be astonishing in the case of a missing child for the authorities to say, well, we're not going to give you any more funding for this. We're telling you to close the investigation.
I mean, that's a whole new different subject, Tom.
No, it's not. It is the subject. It is the subject you brought up. That is the decision that they are faced with. The police say we've got an active line of inquiry. I know it's been a long time. We've chased a lot of people over this. It's cost a lot of money. But are you really saying that in the case of a missing child, you wouldn't want to pursue that active line of inquiry because it costs another 150 grand?
No, what I would say is that I would like to see another 150 grand put into looking looking for a cat killer. If they can find £150,000 for that, why can't they find another £150,000?
I'll tell you, for two reasons.
The cat killer?
2 reasons. One, you have to admit that there is a difference between hunting for a missing child and finding a potential cat killer. And the second reason is because, unfortunately, there isn't a bottomless pit of money that can go round.
Well, there seems to be a bottomless pit of money where, the McCann investigation, we're talking about comparing £11 million and finding another 150,000 again, lately. And, closing this investigation down after 130 and just dismissing it as being foxes.
You're comparing a missing little girl to cats, and a lot of people would say that's bonkers.
I'm saying it's 11. No, I'm saying about the difference in the money, a huge difference between £11 million.
Yeah,
what was the lady's name who lost her son in Greece? Did she get that?
Oh yeah, Ben Needham.
Yeah, Ben Needham did.
I don't know that she got 11 million, but it was several million that has been spent to deal with it. I mean, you can bring up loads. Diane, you can bring up loads of people. I know, of course there are. Of course there are.
The missing persons unit.
Yeah.
Terrible. I watched Long Lost Family yesterday, reunited. There was a case of Lee Boxall, ironically from around the same area, Sutton. Are the police? What are the police investing in that
Diane,
family?
you can absolutely question the resource that's going into different investigations. For instance, a lot of people also get very cross about the amount of money the police have had to spend standing in front of the embassy where Julian Assange currently is. But to say that it's to try and make a comparison between the cases of a little girl that's gone missing and cats that have been killed in brutal ways is odd, don't you think? Or wrong-headed?
No, I don't think it's odd.
Really?
No, I don't. It offends me that 11 million plus another 150,000 can be found, for a missing child that went missing 11 years ago, and people are complaining about 130,000 or whatever it is, on a cat killer. How much? It's so obvious that it's not foxes.
Okay, Diane, thank you. John's in Croydon. Hi, John.
Hi, Tom. I'm sorry, but I don't know why you give people like that so much airtime. Anyway.
Why? Do you not think she's got a point?
No, let's move on. I actually saw a fox chasing a cat down Carshalton Road, Park Hill. It was definitely a fox. And I turned round, had a quick look round, went into the flats, but couldn't see anything. But I'm sure that some of these cats are killed by foxes and some of them are murdered by some sicko out there. But the amount of money they're spending, I don't think it's unreasonable, because if they caught somebody, they would have spent a lot more money prosecuting, putting them in jail or whatever they do with them. And people who have cats, you have to have sympathy for them. It's not a nice thing, is it?
Completely. I completely agree, but and you're right. With the benefit of hindsight, it's very easy to start saying, well, they really shouldn't have spent this much time and this many man hours on looking at this. But had they caught somebody, then we'd all be praising them.
Exactly. So for me, it's both. Someone's out there doing these horrible things, and it's also a certain amount of foxes.
But it's interesting that they finished the investigation by saying, well, it's foxes and cars, not, well, we can't bring this to a conclusion. This is open.
No, this has been going on for 4 years in Croydon, and it's reported in the local press. And someone suspicious was seen in Caterham on the Hill.
Right.
Last year, that was reported. You see, it's only local reporting, so we see more of it here than you would in the national press.
Yeah, well, it sort of drifted away as a national issue, hasn't it, for a while? Maybe that's part of the way in which the police stopped the press campaign that was going by saying, absolutely, we're taking this very seriously and we're going to go after it. John, thank you. Jeff's a new caller to the programme in Blackheath. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Tom.
Hello, sir.
Thanks for taking my call. I just wondered if anyone had considered that this could be something to do with The reason I say this is because it seems to be growing. You know, you sort of see these places with this wire around the edge of fences and things. And my sister had quite a problem with it down in Kent. Her cat was injured on several occasions, and they found out in the end that it was due to razor wire.
Really?
And I just wondered if it was something that had been considered, because it makes a very clean cut, it's lethal, and if cats become tethered, they might sort of try to bolt, but it doesn't quite tie in with the business of cats being presented and laid out in bits.
No, well, quite. And so specific, as some of our callers have described. And also odd that the police, having looked into that and presumably have thought about that, didn't conclude that it was.
You would hope so, yeah. And I think that the police have done a good job. You know, I think it's... I guess I feel proud that I live in a country where the police do take these things quite seriously, you know.
That they've got the time and the energy and the expertise to try and look into it, although a lot of people clearly angry that they've come to the wrong conclusion in their own mind. Jeff, thank you. Emma's in Croydon. Hi, Emma.
Hello.
Hello. What's going on?
I was one of the people that found one of the first cases, and I'm absolutely disgusted at the way the police have treated this. It's clearly not foxes. It can't be, not from the injuries that I saw. It was extremely distressing.
Can you tell me what happened?
I was walking home and I found this body, and the cat was missing some parts. It's quite traumatising, actually, thinking back to what I saw. Part of the skin was missing, and the injury, it was the only way it could have been made was with a knife. Oof. There's no other explanation. There was cut fur. You could see, I looked at the body because I was kind of stunned, little bits of cut fur where it had been sliced, and it had been placed for someone to find it. It wasn't an accident. My parents live in the countryside. They've got chickens. I've seen them killed by a fox once. It's totally, totally different. And no one seems to be mentioning that there's a man wandering around with a knife on our streets, going into people's gardens. You know, if you saw the documentary that was... it's still going on. There was a documentary that the Vice Channel did about it, and they had Snarl on there, and you could see one of the families that had a cat killed. They actually went to the scene, and they'd shown where this guy had cut the body up in the garden.
Oh, my God.
And obviously in the dark, you can see inside people's conservatories from the back garden. He's sitting there in the dark doing this, and no one seems to be concerned about the risk to people.
So you have seen people climbing in and out of gardens and doing this kind of thing, or at least in the process of trying to do this kind of thing?
I found one of the bodies, and I've been following the case quite closely, and I've spoken to some other owners as well. I'm in one of the leafleteers groups that goes out and actually delivers leaflets in areas where where this has happened, to raise awareness and try and get some evidence. But there's absolutely no way in hell that this is foxes. I mean, bodies have been placed in people's gardens in, I can't say the exact way that they've been placed because I've spoken to owners and they don't want that public.
Well, a lot of people have discussed the sort of the triangle shape in which they've been left. It does sound very, very, very odd, Emma, I have to say. Thank you for all your calls on that. A fascinating hour. Thank you. We're going to move on, just on the basis that I don't think we're going to get it solved tonight, to talk about something that is coming tomorrow.